And we're back. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Andy's Music Vault. I am the other leg, Andy Nichols, and you may recognize me from my other show that I do with my co host, Tom Hunyadi, and that's Two Legs, a Paul McCartney podcast. And it's been a couple of weeks, more than that, since I've been able to drop an episode on my own channel, which the last one I did was the unboxing of the Madman Across the Water box set, which I'm still enjoying and recommend. But today's episode, recording and probably posting on the 4th of July, 2022, celebrating America. But of course, we're going to talk about a British progressive rock band. And if you can't already tell, it's going to be on Yes, my second favorite all-time band. And a long time coming. I probably should have done this one first, but there's just so much to get through. And going to try to keep this to a half hour thereabouts and try to get through the whole discography and just kind of go through the main canon, if you will, some favorite solo works, some recent vinyl acquisitions, some box sets, some selected concert films, because man, what a band, and what a just a incredible amount of music, 50 plus years. I'm going to get into a little of their more recent history as I get through their main canon of albums, which, for the record, I'm not really a fan of, but I'll get to that when we get through the timeline. I'm rocking my Yes, but it's the Anderson, Rabin, and Wakeman version of Yes shirt, which was apparently only done for a little while because of the Roger Dean copyright thing. And Roger Dean, if you don't know, was the classic artist who designed the logo and all the classic 70s album artwork that they became known for, really. Above my shoulder over there, you see the Stephen Wilson Remixes box set, which came out a couple of years ago, which was so well done, especially on vinyl. So yes, formed in 1968, early progressive rock band, kind of came out of, John Anderson came from the north of England, Chris Squire, that was where they both met. And the first lineup of Yes included Peter Banks and Bill Bruford and Tony Kaye on keyboards. And that first lineup did two albums. The first one, Yes, which came out in 1969. Again, the first couple of Yes albums are very, very different from what the sound they became known for. Good cover version of the Beatles' Every Little Thing on this first one, though, from 1969. This is the UK cover. In the US, it was a little different. It was this version in the US. More tasteful UK cover, I think, years before the classic logo. I'll get through the lineups as we go through them because there's so many changes. There's so many changes and people coming and going. And, Yes is not everybody's cup of tea. People are always very stunned when I tell them that they're my second favorite band. To me, my holy trinity is the Beatles and solo work, and then Yes, and then The Who. That's my holy trinity. And then everybody else kind of comes after that. Well, obviously there's the Beatles and everybody. There's the Beatles and solo, and then for me there's these two groups. And Yes is a brand of music that takes a lot. People either like it or they don't. Their music changed, of course, in the 1980s. Like a lot of bands did, they adapted, especially ones from the 70s. They became popular, and they had that huge hit with Owner of a Lonely Heart in the 80s, which I enjoy, and I enjoy that period too. I enjoy all eras of Yes music except the most recent one, but we'll get to that in a little bit. I think I prefer the progressive era more, but I could listen to their 80s music just as well. The only difference is that there wasn't a ton of output. They only put out about 2 or 3 albums officially branded as Yes in the 80s with 90125 and Big Generator. And there was offshoot bands, which we're going to get to. But yeah, the first lineup, Peter Banks, John, the Anderson and Squire were the nucleus, right? They were the heart of the band. They were the core of the band. That's where and they were yin and yang. John Anderson's very kind of spiritual person, and Squire was just like a big, total opposite kind of people. And Chris Squire sadly passed away 7 years ago, leukemia. And those of you in the Yes world and music world know that Alan White, who later became the drummer of Yes, also just recently passed away last month. So and Peter Banks sadly passed away a few years ago. So a few members of the Yes family have departed, which is sad, but they carry the torch, and that's what Chris Squire, the founding member of the band, wanted, and you got to respect that. The current bass player Billy Sherwood, who I've seen and I've talked to, and this is what they wanted to do. So God bless them. I can't really get behind it anymore personally, just because it's too derivative. But continuing on, first album 1969 doesn't do that much. They got a really cool cover of Something's Coming from West Side Story on here. And of course, a great track on this one called Survival. 8 tracks, first album. Second album, Time and a Word, 1970, with the suggestive album artwork for the UK. This was banned in the US. You had this cover instead, put on there instead, by which time you see Steve Howe on the cover. But Steve Howe doesn't play on this record. Steve Howe, as you know, is the classic Yes guitarist who joined after the third album. This album was still made by the first lineup of Yes. Good, the title track, Time and a Word, is a great track. You've got a great Richie Havens number on there called No Opportunity Necessary, No Experience Needed. Probably my favorite song on this album is probably The Prophet. Again, this was Yes experimenting with an orchestra too for the first time on record, which was a big thing back then in 1970. But again, didn't really set the world on fire. And bands were pretty fortunate back then that labels were very carte blanche and just gave them some time to figure it out. Because nowadays, or even now or 5 or 10 years ago, if you didn't make it after the first single or the first album, you were done. So this album really didn't do much either as well. As Yes became bigger, of course in the 70s, then these albums kind of gained a lot of bit more cred. But upon first drop, they didn't really break America yet. They didn't tour. They toured in England. And finally made their way to America late in 1970, I believe, opening for Jethro Tull. But the next album is really where the band starts to come into their own, and that's 1971's The Yes album. Okay, this is the first of the classic, what we call the classic era of the Yes albums, and this is the same lineup as the first two, but the departure of Peter Banks as a guitarist and the addition of the awesome Steve Howe on guitar. And this was the first real true Yes sounding album, classic. Yours Is No Disgrace, The Clap, Steve Howe's solo number, Starship Trooper, of course the big FM hit later on, I've Seen All Good People, an album cut called The Venture, which is nice, and then a real epic closer called Perpetual Change, which I love. I mean, the Yes album, recorded in 1970. They actually went out to the farm country to do it, and then it came out in early 71. This is the Stephen Wilson remix version. Again, I've got all these iterations of the album that I've had for years, but yeah, I mean, really, just the first classic of the Yes albums. No classic Yes logo yet, but that's coming. That's coming. And they did tour America also on this tour as well. But really, kind of, I've Seen All Good People was the breakthrough. Didn't set the world on fire, but it did better than the first two albums, and that was the big selling point. I was like, okay, the label Atlantic Records, who they were signed to, Ahmet Ertegun was like, okay, now you guys have made it, and they've made it, and they really made it on their next record, and that was the album that really kind of broke them in America, and that is 1972's Fragile. Okay, and that again recorded at the end of 71. Another lineup change, okay? As I mentioned, a lot of lineup changes in Yes. And on this album, we have the addition of the classic Yes 70s keyboardist Rick Wakeman, virtuoso. Tony Kaye was on the previously first 3 Yes albums. Much more of an organ guy. That's Tony right there. But their sound changed. They wanted more synths and keyboards, and Tony was more of a Hammond organ kind of player, and they wanted to expand their sound a little bit, and boy, did they ever. I mean, this was a big hit in America, buoyed by the single Roundabout, which, of course, everybody knows, at 8 minutes, but I'm sure an edited version went out there in America. Still, the logo is not yet, but this is the first album that had the Roger Dean artwork. And there we see the Moore Glade Mover gracing the globe and the back here as well, with the globe as well. Again, these are all kind of the Rhino reissues that I got a couple of years ago. And there you see Mr. Rick Wakeman, John, Steve, Chris, and Bill. Bill Bruford still with the band at this point in time, as well because he departs soon as well. Classic album. This is most casual fans know Roundabout. The other big hit on this album, Long Distance Runaround, which was a shorter Yes song. Yes, of course, is known for their huge long epics. Long Distance Runaround was a kind of a FM hit. Some really great album cuts here, though, with Heart of the Sunrise, which is over 10 minutes, became a staple for Yes, along with South Side of the Sky. And that was really it on this record. This album had individual solo songs on it. So you had a Steve Howe solo, Mood for a Day, Bill Bruford, 5% for Nothing, Wakeman with Cans and Bram. So it wasn't like there was there's only 4 main album tracks on this. Roundabout, South Side of the Sky, Long Distance Runaround, and Heart of the Sunrise. The rest were kind of all small solo bits, but the band numbers are epic on this album, and really the first major hit that Yes had internationally. Next. Ooh, here we go. Now we're getting into deep territory now. 1972 and Close to the Edge. Again, the Steven Wilson remix is the version I have here, and this widely regarded as one of the best progressive rock albums of all time, and rightly so. This is Yes coming to their own into what they really wanted to become, with what the vision Anderson had for the band. The lineup here is the same as Fragile: Anderson, Squire, Howe, Rick Wakeman, and Bill Bruford, hitting on all cylinders. Close to the Edge, 18-minute track, one long side of vinyl that takes all of side one. Epic, grandiose, moving, inspirational, or any adjective you want to apply. It's like church music. It's like a religion. It moves. There's 4 movements to the song that go. There's an intro and then there's a refrain, and it's everything that proggers love about Yes is what Close to the Edge is, and it's just as good as on side 2. On side 2, you've got 2 tracks, And You and I, which became another 10 minutes, which was another Yes staple, and also the album closes with Siberian Katru, which again, for the life of me, I don't know what the lyrics mean. And that's the thing. With Yes lyrics, I really don't analyze them. I listen to it because I like how it sounds. Yes, the music and the lyrics are generally inspirational and positive influenced, mainly, and the lyrics are 99% Anderson with a little bit by Howe at this stage. So that's, a lot of religious overtones in the music, of which I'm not really familiar with. I just like how it sounds. I say this on 2 legs too. I don't get caught up in analyzing lyrics or criticizing McCartney over his lyrics. I just like how it sounds. The same philosophy and principle applies to Yes. You listen to all these songs that have religious overtones. I don't know what it means, but I like how it sounds. And then here we've got the gatefold of Close to the Edge. Just really cool artwork by Roger Dean, depicting what the band, is Close to the Edge. I mean, this is heavy, heavy days. And really, if you're gonna dive into true progressive rock with Yes, I would actually start with Close to the Edge before you go into Fragile. This is the album to listen to. This is what they're known for. Outside, obviously Roundabout is the hit, but really, if you're really going to be if you want to try Yes and give Yes a try, you have to listen to Close to the Edge. This is the Bible. And it's included in any kind of top 10 best prog albums list. Well, most of them should include it anyway, but this is always at the top of the list. Worth recommending. Okay, lineup change again. Next album from Yes is a live album. That's 1973's Yes Songs. Now, we have our next departure. Bill Bruford, the drummer on the first 5 albums. Yes, Time and a Word, the Yes album, Fragile, and Close to the Edge. He departs, and he joins fellow proggers King Crimson. Bill was much more of a jazzier drummer. Darker, just, a busier drummer, jazzier. King Crimson was much more of a darker thing. Bill Bruford felt that Yes, by this point, was just going to be recycling themselves. with what they were doing and felt he really couldn't contribute to anything. So he finished Close to the Edge and left. The band began a tour of the States, and Alan White joined, had about a week, 3 days to learn all the material, and the product is Yes Songs. And you've got Bill Bruford on a couple tracks on here, and also Alan White on the bulk of the tracks here. And Yes Songs on vinyl is a triple album, which did very well in America. Now Yes has made it. They've exploded. They've done big business. Triple live album in 1973. This is before Wings Over America and everything else too. So this is the best of all their kind of that 3-album run that I just talked about. The Yes album, Fragile, and Close to the Edge. That's what's represented here. Nothing from those first 2 albums. So you're getting Perpetual Change and You and I, Roundabout, All Good People, Close to the Edge, Yours Is No Disgrace. You're getting all those big numbers. And wasn't recorded too well. Could use an upgrade, but this is a great live document of early 70s Yes. Now, next, controversial album, and my favorite Yes album of all time. I featured it on the show that we did with Tom on Two Legs on our favorite 30 other albums outside of the Beatles and Paul. And that is 1973's Tales from Topographic Oceans. You either love it or you hate it. And again, this is the Stephen Wilson 2016, I want to say, remix. Ambitious record. 4 songs, 20 minutes each. Okay? Definitely required listening. You can't just throw this on. I've been at parties and I've been in pubs and I've thrown on a track from this album just to see what the reactions are of people, and they're quite interesting. Again, religious overtones on this. The 4 tracks are The Revealing Science of God, The Remembering, The Ancient, and side 4 is Ritual. Probably side 1 is my favorite Yes track. It's probably my all-time Yes favorite track of all time, The Revealing Science of God. It's the most commercial one on the whole album. That sounds kind of, the most like kind of Close to the Edge. Beautiful Roger Dean artwork here with the landscape, Tales from Topographic Oceans, and the rocks and the fish on the back. The album, again, did very, very well before it even was released because Yes had hit, Yes was huge in America and England now. So even before the album shipped, it had sold well because such was their staying power and their impact at this point. They are huge. But, and it's also Alan White's first appearance on drums on a studio record. And what an intro. I mean, you want to listen to Alan White goes from 3 years prior, to playing with John Lennon and doing Instant Karma, and then doing Live Peace in Toronto, and playing on Imagine and All Things Must Pass, which is very commercial pop stuff. And then makes music that is totally 180 in another direction with music like this. It's mind-blowing. It's the album I first discovered when I was a teenager. Excuse me, I was going through my dad's record collection and, having kind of get burnt out on Beatles, and I was just intrigued. I couldn't fathom how one song could take 20 minutes. I remember looking at the vinyl and seeing The Revealing Science of God, 20 minutes and 32 seconds. I'm like, how is this possible? So I just put it on one day, and the rest they say is history. I was hooked. John Anderson has a very high-pitched, voice. It's very distinguishable. That combination with the keyboards and the synths, and I've said before on Two Legs, I enjoy keyboards and synth work. I always have. And this album opened the door to Yes for me. I actually discovered this first before any other classic Yes album, believe it or not, which a lot of people find hard to believe, but it's true. Even for the most ardent Yes fan, and I am, there are moments of this album that are tedious. And there are, especially on side 3 with The Ancient. That track kind of goes all over the place sonically, and you really have to be in the mood to listen to this album all the way through. And I have over the years. I mean, I own probably a dozen copies of it. First editions on CD, second, Atlantic reissues, Rhino reissues, vinyl reissues, you name it. You name it, I've owned it. And I still own it. But it's an album that will remain near and dear to me. Even if the people that I kind of run with in my circles of friends don't get it, it's fine. It means a lot to me, and it always will. I got to see them do 2 songs from this album live in the close to 30 times I've seen Yes since 1998. I got to see them do Revealing. I got to see them do Ritual, I got to see them with Rick Wakeman do that in 2002, and I'm just so just fortunate I was able to see them do this stuff. So that's Tales. That's Tales from Topographic Oceans, 1973. However, did not go over so well with everybody in the band. Rick Wakeman did not like the music on this album and then left. Again, I told you at the top of this, there was going to be departures and shuffling band members for years. And he leaves after Tales because he felt the music was too padded out and didn't like it. And, he leaves and then is replaced by Patrick Moraz, who later became keyboardist with the Moody Blues. And that incarnation of Yes released in 1974, Relayer. Again, diehards typically kind of cite this as their favorite Yes album. Certainly up there for me as well. Darker album. Much more on the theme of what Tales was. John Anderson was in a kind of... This was the mode he was in at this point, writing these epic long songs. Another album. Only 3 tracks on this album. Side 1, The Gates of Delirium. Basically a battle about, good versus evil, heaven and hell, and how good will always kind of win out in the end. And that's kind of beautifully kind of demonstrated with the closing portion of The Gates of Delirium, which is called Soon, which is done so well. Probably Yes's jazziest album. A lot of how Steve Howes playing on Relayer is incredible. Just listen to the second track, Sound Chaser. I mean, that's incredible music and guitar playing by Steve Howe on that. And of course, the band is tight. Squire's playing is off the charts. Alan White's drumming is off the charts here. Again, the guy that played on Imagine is playing out of his mind on this album on Relayer. Incredible. Side 3, also To Be Over, another 9-minute track, beautiful, calm, relaxing song. Did very well, but it was not, and this version of Yes was only to be one lineup. Patrick Moraz only did one album with Yes, but it's still widely considered one of their best, and a lot of fans go to it still as their hardcore. Probably easily top 10 album for me, maybe the lower 10, but definitely up there for me. He leaves. And again, Yes is touring to great success during this time in the States and everything else. They're on top of their game right now. Selling out 100,000. They did 100,000 people at JFK Arena in Philadelphia, Roosevelt Stadium in '76, just killing it. Them and their counterparts. They're ahead of Genesis right now. Genesis went on to have huge success later in the '80s, but right now, Yes is the top dog in progressive rock. Hands down, them and ELP. I don't really put Floyd in that category because Floyd was more of a crossover. Yes, they were progressive, but they were much more. They had more of the pop crossover. So Yes, I think was by and large the top dog in this camp right now. So fast forward a couple more years. Now you've got punk evolving as a big kind of genre right now, and punk kind of takes over. The songwriting has to change. Yes has to adapt to their style to stay current. And what do? They come out with a fresh-sounding album in 1977. Again, only 5 tracks, but the songs are shorter, except for one, and tighter and brighter. Not so deep and dark, as the last couple albums were. And that's 1977's Going for the One. First album not to have Roger Dean's artwork on it in some years. You've got the fellow there in Next to Nothing, standing at the towers in Los Angeles, but you've got Roger's classic Yes logo on it. Top 3 favorite Yes album, for sure. Going for the One. The hit off this album was Wondrous Stories, which was a top 10 hit in America. 3-minute single. Awesome song. Steve Howe on the mandolin. But probably one of my favorite Yes songs of all time, after Revealing Saints of God, is Awaken. And that closes the album. 15 minutes, Rick Wakeman on a church organ, literally playing it in a church. This album was recorded in Montreux, Switzerland. and released in the summer of '77, and widely regarded as still one of their best of all time, through and through. So, high on the heels of success of Going for the One, Wakeman's back. The Classic Five, as this version of Yes has become canon now. Worldwide tours, a lot of sold-out nights at Madison Square Garden. They're riding high. And the same lineup then in 1978 records and produces the follow-up, Tormato, which is a lesser effort by all accounts, by most people. It's not nearly as good as Going for the One. It's got its fans. I'm one of them. It's not nearly as good as Going for the One, but it is a good record, okay? It's, again, musical tastes were shifting here in the late 70s, trying an aging prog band trying to stay relevant. So one kind of semi-hit on this album, Don't Kill the Whale. I know that core members of the band thought it could have been better. John's songwriting by this point had kind of taken a little bit more of a kind of lighter affair. And if you follow John's solo career, and I'll show a couple of his albums, you can see the trend that his songwriting was going on. There wasn't as many kind of heavy epics on this one, say as Close to the Edge or Fragile, not of that ilk. There are some, though. The album opener, Future Times Rejoice, classic Yes. Release, classic Yes. And the album closer, On the Silent Wings of Freedom. Chris Squire really shines on that track, with his Rickenbacker bass. Some lovely ballads on this album as well, too. Rejoice, Onward, which was written by Chris Squire. So, definitely a band going in different directions. As you can see here, I almost wish this was the front cover here with everybody here. But still a successful record and a tour that followed that carried them all the way until 1979 when they reconvened to do another album, which was going to be produced by Roy Thomas Baker of Queen fame. And these sessions were going to be in Paris, and they ultimately fell apart. John and Rick really didn't have the heart to continue. The material was kind of really drying up, and Alan White broke his ankle skiing. So that kind of ended the band, really. For all intents and purposes, John and Rick left, and that reduced Yes to the trio of Howe, Squire, and White to continue, or not to continue. But John and Rick were very much still in the band contractually through 1980, but they left, and shows were already sold out for 1980, so they very quickly had to kind of come up with another lineup. Rick went back to doing solo work, and John did as well. And I'll get to that again once I get through the Yes canon. I'll get to their solo stuff, selected solo stuff, because there's so much of it. So I just have a few of my favorites chosen. So John and Rick exit, and Yes is reduced to a trio. Who do they get in? So who was hot 1979-80 other than the Buggles with their big hit Video Killed the Radio Star, which was the first video on MTV when that came out. So the Buggles was Trevor Horn and Jeff Downs, and those guys were drafted in to Yes, and they ended up producing the next Yes album, which was called Drama. And Trevor Horn, I know those of you who are McCartney fans, he helped co-produce a couple tracks on Flowers in the Dirt. Really was more of became known as a producer, but was a good musician in his own right, bass player and singer. And following in the footsteps of John Anderson was no easy task. But Drama is a great record. Don't be fooled just because John and Rick are not on it. There's people out there. And I'm a big John supporter, and I'll get to my views on that later. But this is every much as a true Yes record as there ever was one. This was much a return to form, okay? Roger Dean's artwork has returned here. Darker album, much darker album. Not as bright and light and optimistic as a typical Yes album is. Kind of harkens it back to an earlier the Yes album. Really heavy. Chris really was the driving factor of the band here at this point. And Steve Howe, making sure that the music was really on point. Machine Messiah to open the album. Heavy, epic rock song, almost metal-like. Into the Lens, Run Through the Light, Does It Really Happen? These are songs that are bass-driven. And obviously some excellent guitar work by Steve Howe, but the bass really, really takes forefront on this album. And closing it out with 6 tracks on this record. Tempus Fugit, Time Flies in Latin. So, again, this bonus CD has some of the sessions from 79 where John and Rick were still with the band. but they were scrapped. And really a 6-song selection for an album in 1980 here for this version of Yes. And there you can see the 1980 Yes right there, okay? But Trevor Horn took a lot of heat, especially in his native homeland of the UK. The UK audiences were not as forgiving for Trevor Horn being the new vocalist in Yes. It was much different in America. I think most audiences didn't even realize that John and Rick were gone. Yes just came in and just played, a great, bunch of shows and sold out. And he's not John Anderson, but nobody else is. But he did as well as he could. Really hard to reproduce those vocal parts. They really are. But he's got his place in Yes history, and it continued on after this album in a non-performing role. But really a gem of a record. Probably stronger than Tormato. Really, it really is. I mean, it's a very strong record musically, and it's really happening. So, but the tour, that lineup of Yes was not to continue. That was a one in this phase. It ended. Reception back home in the UK was not good. They did not like him replacing John Anderson, and at this point, Yes really had broken up, and it was back down to Steve, Chris, and Alan. But at this point, Steve left to go join with Jeff Downes and joined forces to create Asia. And Asia had their first album in 1982. So now Steve Howe is gone. And now that's only left now is Chris Squire and Alan White. And they, for a little bit there, they did do a single together called Run With The Fox, kind of a Christmas single, which was nice. They ended up joining up forces with Jimmy Page, and we're going to maybe do a band called XYZ, Yes, Zeppelin. And they ended up doing some demos, but nothing really came out of that. One song that was done during that session became a later Yes track called Mind Drive 20 years later. But it was not to be. At that point, this is where Yes kind of changes direction here now a little bit. And, the band wanted to continue, and they were looking for another, songwriter and vocalist to start a new band, not continue Yes. And that person ended up being Trevor Rabin. And the idea was not to call the band Yes. They were going to be known as Cinema. And at that point, it was Chris Squire, still Alan White, and now Trevor Rabin, who had some, local fame in South Africa with a band called Rabbit, locally, not that big. And then Tony Kaye was invited back. So this band, they were calling themselves Cinema, and just rehearsing. No idea to really call them Yes again. And then Chris Squire got together with John Anderson one night and was playing the tapes, and I don't know if this has turned into like lore, or the record company said, hey, if you get John Anderson back on it, you could sell more by calling it Yes. I tend to think that's probably what happened. And of course, the mega hit that was produced from this this first of many reunions was Owner of a Lonely Heart. And Anderson comes back to the fold very, very late here in 1982. Again, after the band was already kind of another band, and then Anderson comes back, and they said, well, you might as well just call it Yes again. And John came back in at the 11th hour, put some vocals on the tracks, and voila, we have a brand new smash Yes album in 1983 with 90125. Their biggest selling album ever to this date, their most successful album. The video age is taken off. Owner of a Lonely Heart, a great video, I'm sure many of you have seen, and just a classic 80s pop record. There's no Rick Wakeman, so now the band is John Anderson, Trevor Rabin, Chris Squire, Alan White, and original keyboard player Tony Kaye on those first 3 records I showed earlier. He's now back in the fold, doing keyboard work. But in truth, Trevor Rabin did a lot himself. But I think for legitimacy reasons, they wanted to have another member of Yes back in there. So, but Tony played well, and this sent Yes into another era in the 1980s to be hugely successful. And this is such a great record through and through, start to finish. Owner of a Lonely Heart was the big hit. You had another big album-orientated hit with It Can Happen. Changes, Leave It was another big single on this. And even some great deep album cuts like Hearts, written by Anderson and Trevor Rabin. Hearts is probably one of my best Yes songs, favorite Yes songs. Hold On, Our Song, City of Love, 9 tracks. Comes out in the fall of '83. Yes is like on par with the Police in terms of, success. This is like the Police and Yes right now. Like in terms of this is big time. Yes is bigger than they ever were in the '70s. Now you've got a new legion of fans that are together now because of the success that this new version of Yes. No Steve Howe, no Rick Wakeman. That's very pop orientated. The heavy prog stuff is gone. Although when Yes does go on tour in the 80s with Trevor Rabin and Tony Kaye, they do a mix of classic Yes and newer Yes. And those recordings are really worth seeking out because you get to hear Trevor Rabin's take on Steve Howe's material. And it's really good. And Trevor Rabin is an unsung hero in the Yes history because he kept the band going. I know they didn't think it was going to be called Yes, but without that shot in the arm and branding the band back together as Yes, it probably dies on the vine, and Yes does not continue. And Trevor Rabin, for that reason alone, is one of the all-time members of Yes because he continued on the band in a new modern way where the band could exist in the 1980s and still revisit their past. And they toured quite a bit in support of this album. And again, as I said at the top, this lineup only produced 3 albums altogether: Rabin, Anderson, Squire, White, and Kaye. They only did 3 records between 83 and 94. And that could be probably just due to the fact that they were touring, the 80s, the business of rock and roll dictating things, personnel problems. So their next album doesn't come out until 4 years later almost, in September of 87, I think. And that was Big Generator, the follow-up, which was not nearly as successful as 90125, although a pretty decent hit. You had Rhythm of Love, which was the big hit off of this, and Love Will Find a Way. Only 8 tracks, but it did well. Not nearly as good as 90125, but classic 80s, big production all over it. Big, very 80s sounding. Finalize is a great track. Shoot High, Aim Low is a great track. And a nice album closer with Holy Lamb in a typical Yes kind of acoustic, low-key fashion. But again, it's the second lineup of this 80s lineup, and they toured well, but this is where cracks start to appear on the wall again a little bit here now. A little bit. Now, after this lineup of the band tours and they do their thing, it splinters off again. And Anderson leaves. And who does Anderson? Anderson forms another band, another version of Yes. And who does he team up with? He teams up with his old Yes mates from the 70s. He teams up with Bill Bruford, the original Yes drummer, Steve Howe, and Rick Wakeman, and they form an offshoot band, Anderson, Bruford, Wakeman, and Howe, which was much more of the spirit of the 70s Yes. Okay, so Anderson didn't like being kind of forced into a commercial aspect of what the kind of current Yes had become. Very commercialized, very corporate. He didn't like that. He left and broke off, and those 4 guys couldn't call themselves Yes legally, so they recorded themselves as Anderson, Bruford, Wakeman, and Howe, and this came out in 1989, and 9 tracks, and very, very similar sounding to the classic 70s Yes music. Brother of Mine, Order of the Universe, Fist of Fire. I was almost going to say Firth the Fifth. That's a Genesis song. The Meeting, kind of lightweight, not really heavy 70s prog. It's like 80s prog, but it's much more in tune of what this. And of course, Roger Dean did the artwork, so that of course helped seal the deal. And they went out and toured as Anderson, Bruford, Wakeman, and Howe. They couldn't call themselves Yes, and then they did a tour. And here's the live album there. They did the name of the tour, cloyingly, was called An Evening of Yes Music, but they weren't billed as Yes. So this led to some lawsuits and litigation, as you can imagine, because proper Yes was like, well, we're still a band, but what's going on? So a lot of messy lawsuits later. All gets resolved, and both parties end up coming together to form and produce a one album together, probably the lowest of the Yes canon, and that's the Union album in 1991. These are all 8 guys between both fractions now of Yes that got together to do one record, but not really, because so many people had their hands in this and overdubbing, and most members of the band disowned this album because they didn't have a lot of input on it. Between both camps having their own kind of stuff involved with it, and but there are some good tracks on it. Trevor Rabin's got some good songwriting on here. Miracle of Life and Lift Me Up. Those are some great songs that he wrote. And so you've got the two Yes camps forming here for one album, which is Anderson, Bruford, Howe, and Wakeman, and White, and Tony Kaye, and Chris Squire. And Billy Sherwood also starts to help out here, and he comes into the fray with The More We Live, Let Go, Billy Sherwood is now a member of Yes, but he first makes his appearance on a Yes record here. So not really a remembered record, but the tour was, and I know Rick Wakeman speaks fondly of that when they got together, and all 8 guys toured in 1991 and 92 and played in the round. And to imagine 8 guys, that's a lot of egos up there on stage, and particularly the only kind of bad blood that was had between anybody was between Trevor Rabin and Steve Howe, as you can imagine, the keeper of the flame of the 70s Yes music and the 80s Yes music. And they sometimes they didn't jive, let's just say, on stage together. But go check out some clips on YouTube from the Union tour. Absolutely incredible. You had all 8 guys playing Awaken, which was just, even though some of them weren't on the original track. So it's just some really great shows. And I know that the band is very fond of that tour, looking back on it. They've all spoken very highly of it. At the height of their game, they did Madison Square Garden. They could still pack them in and do that. And this carried on through 92, and then they went different ways again. Bruford and Wakeman exit stage right, along with Steve Howe, and that 80s lineup of the band come back together to produce one more album. And if I'm being totally honest, it's probably my favorite lineup out of the 80s lineup of Yes, even though this album came out in the 90s, and that is 1994's Talk. Artwork by Peter Max. Those of you in your Beatles lore, you know who Peter Max is. He did the artwork for this album. This album did not sell well, okay? It's not really remembered, but among the Yes diehards, this album is considered a latter-day masterpiece, and it rightly is so. I think I like it better than 90125 and easily Big Generator. This is Trevor Rabin and John Anderson at their closest. Remember, Trevor Rabin is the new boy in the 80s, and John Anderson is the classic guy from the 70s. On this album, they really came together as a unit, as a songwriting team, to produce a really, really harmonious, spiritual record that has shades of 80s Yes and 70s Yes. And I think that's why I like it, because you got a little both. A little poppy, a little proggy. And the last track is called Endless Dream. It's like 15 minutes. It's up there with Awaken, Close to the Edge, and Tales. It's that good. Again, they toured Madison Square Garden. Didn't really do much though. It did not sell well. They promoted it. They went on David Letterman. They went on Howard Stern. But sadly, this album did not make any dent into anywhere. I gotta remember, 1994 now. Now rap is like big. Where is there any avenue for any kind of 70s, 70s or 80s prog rock act in the mid 90s? Not too, they didn't do too well. But the record is really good, and I really urge anybody out there willing to dip their toes into the water with Yes, outside of the classic hits, take a listen to Talk from 1994. It is absolutely just a magical album. I got to see the Anderson, Rabin, Wakeman version of Yes in 2017 do I Am Waiting, which is on this album. The Calling, State of Play, Walls. Well, Roger Hodgson gets a co-writing goat from Supertramp. He gets a co-writing credit on here. And this is the last album that the 80s version of Yes produces. Trevor Rabin, Anderson Squire, Tony Kaye, and Alan White. And then it's like, then what to do? So Trevor Rabin leaves Yes and goes on to become a successful composer of film soundtracks. He did the soundtrack to Armageddon and countless other movies. You look him up. He's done so much film work as well. And so he had a great career after Yes doing film work. But at this point, what's left for Yes now? Well, the only thing that's left for Yes is to continue on that nostalgia train. And in 95, 96, which is where I come on board with the band, the Classic Five reunite for just a concert in L.A. Actually, I'm sorry, not in L.A., in San Luis Obispo in the spring of 96. Anderson calls up Steve Howe, Rick Wakeman, Alan White, and Chris Squire, and they get together and they do 3 concerts that become known as the Keys to Ascension shows. And these are the 2 live albums that encompass that. Why they did 2 CDs for one show, I don't know. And also do new studio material. Now this was exciting because this is when I first caught the bug. So back in those days, I was on the AOL chat rooms reading about Yes and what they were doing. So, reading about this concert that was happening and learning all this music and knowing that the classic 70s band was getting back together again. They're doing Siberian Khatru, The Revealing Science of God, Close to the Edge, Awaken, Going for the One, and You and I, Turn of the Century. All classic 70s Yes material. And it's awesome. It's awesome. And they get together to do new studio tracks as well, which are on these live albums as well, but eventually comes out as its own release, Key Studio, which, again, the record company strategy was not really good. Years later, it should have been 1 live album and 1 studio album at the time. The studio tracks come out in 2001 or 2. Try to find this now. This is hard to come by. But they're also on the Keys to Ascension 1 and 2 discs. And the studio tracks are great. Long, 18, 19-minute long songs. That is Mind Drive. Really like 90s Yes, trying to do 70s Yes again. And they do it really, really well. And but again, as everything with Yes, nothing is forever. It changes. They were supposed to do a tour. Wakeman didn't like the management, so Wakeman bows out. At this point, Billy Sherwood, as I mentioned, a session bass player on the Talk Tour, also got involved with Union. He comes back into the fold now as a touring member of the band, and he had done a side project with Chris Squire, and which ultimately kind of became the next Yes album, which is not, it's okay, but it's not nearly as good as the other Yes albums. And that there's some good tracks on it. There really are. But it was a Chris Squire and Billy Sherwood side project that kind of became a Yes album once John and Steve got involved. And that album was 1997's Open Your Eyes, which is very commercial. It's not a well-remembered Yes album. There are some good tracks on it. It was Yes trying to get on the radio again. Open Your Eyes was the hit single. I remember hearing that a little bit. Some good album tracks. New State of Mind. From the Balcony features John and Steve. Man in the Moon, Universal Garden. Again, it was a forced attempt. And I give credit to Billy Sherwood and the band for, like, look, we're trying to tour. They had a tour booked with Wakeman, so they had to do something, right? So they did something, and they came up with an album just to get it out there. That's when I first saw them, and it was in 98, was on the Open Your Eyes tour and 30th anniversary tour. I first saw them then, and they played a couple songs from this album as well as the classics. So, and they were great. But it definitely did not have the spirit of a classic Yes record. Now, there was no keyboardist on this record, but later drafted in to replace Wakeman, who had left, was a Russian-born keyboard virtuoso, Igor Koroshev. And that lineup of Yes, Anderson, Howe, Squire, White, and Billy Sherwood, and now Igor, get together and they go to Vancouver in 98, 99, and they write and produce one of my favorite Yes records of all time, and that's 1999's The Ladder. Probably most people don't have this, as a essential Yes album. For me, it is. Why? Because it's Yes trying to do the 70s again. It's like when Wakeman came back in the 90s and they did those throwback tracks. It's the same thing here. Anderson's at the forefront of the songwriting here. You can tell his songwriting's on point. Such a wonderful album. Homeworld, the title track, became a video game and became the theme song to that video game. It'll Be a Good Day. Face to Face, If Only You Knew, To Be Alive, The Messenger, New Languages, Nine Voices. Yeah, you got a couple throwaways on here, trying to get on the radio tracks, but really, Homeworld and the New Languages, tracks that are 8-9 minutes long, that's really what Yes is. Keyboard flourishes, good bass playing, good songwriting, and just, angelic-like vocals from John Anderson. And it's why it came out at an important time in my life, and it means a lot to me still now. It's why when I met John Anderson in 2019, I brought The Ladder on vinyl for him to sign, which you can see right here. I bought this when it came out. It's been since reissued, but The Ladder to me, and he was surprised I had it. He couldn't believe I had a copy of The Ladder in his high-pitched voice. Oh, you have that on vinyl? I said, yeah, John, and he took a picture. So, The Ladder really, for me, is the last great Yes album. They've done a few more since. and one more with John, which was good. But to me, the latter is the last true great Yes album. Okay, live album from that tour, House of Yes. They did a show in Vegas at the House of Blues, which was on DirecTV. I remember like setting my VCR to record it, and just a great show. I saw them on this tour as well. And the Yes touring machine is off and running now. I mean, between 98 and 2004, I think I probably saw them close to 15, 16 times. A lot of times, you know. So I was blessed to have been around to have seen them so many times in this period, and such a fruitful period, you know. So, again, nothing lasts forever. Igor Koroshev, the keyboardist, gets himself into a little trouble. He leaves. Yes is now reduced to a four-piece again. No keyboardist, and they get back together in the studio again, and they record one more album with an orchestra, which had not been done since 1970's Time and a Word. That was the second CD that I showed you earlier. And that album became Magnification, which is a good record. I enjoy it. It ends up being John Anderson's last album with Yes, sadly. And this album, again, didn't do too much. It was recorded with an orchestra. It's very good. They toured with an orchestra. I saw them actually 3 days before 9/11 in New York City. So, and it came out on 9/11. So I have a lot of 9/11 memories with this album, as I do with Paul McCartney and Driving Rain, as we've talked about on Two Legs. Good record. Lots of good playing on it. I'm not crazy about the orchestra. I prefer, Yes, having, you know, a keyboard player in the band. But it's still a great record. It's not the latter, but I really enjoy it. In the presence of Spirit of Survival, Magnification, Give Love Each Day. That's a great track. We agree. So it's just a nice record. And the tour, if you've ever seen it, look up Yes Symphonic, the show they did in Amsterdam with the orchestra. Absolutely incredible. Doing things like Gates of Delirium and Ritual with an orchestra. Just incredible. And this is really where I kind of get off board, really. I mean, I still saw the band. I supported them. I bought their stuff, most of it. But after this point, Rick Wakeman does come back in 2002, and they do tour, and I saw them, and I got to see them do Revealing and Ritual, and they came back for a 35th anniversary tour. No new music, but they toured, and the five now their classic five are back. See, it's constantly who's out, who's in, who's out with Yes. 2002 to 2004, you've got the classic five back together again, toured all over the world internationally, saw them boatload of times, great concerts, but no studio work. And at that point in 2004, they take a little bit of a break, and they end up being a couple years break until 2008, when Yes proper comes back together again, but without John Anderson and no new album. They end up touring with a guy by the name of Benoit David. And what, long story short, was Anderson wanted to tour, but got very sick and couldn't. And Wakeman didn't want to tour without Anderson, so his son Oliver came in, and they toured for a while. No new album. And then finally, in 2011, that version of the band ended up putting out an album which harkened back to the original, the original 1980 lineup, with Drama and Trevor Horn, and that ended up being Fly From Here. And this came out in 2011. And you also had the return of Jeff Downes in the band on keys. So you have Rick's son on here a little bit, and also new vocalist Benoit David on here with Trevor Horn producing. Now, this is a good record. Why is it a good record? Because Fly From Here, and 90% of it is all leftovers and outtakes from the Drama Yes album from 1980, which I showed a little bit before ago. So this is based, and it came out in 2011. So this was even though John's not on this is a really good record. And you've got Benoit David, who sings like John, but is trying to have his own voice, and they end up doing a really good album. The Fly From Here suite ends up being like 20 minutes. Classic long Yes track. A lot of Buggles material left over on here. So, and Trevor Horn produced it. So it checks all the boxes for a Yes record for me, and I really enjoyed it. So that happens, okay, and then what happens then is that Benoit David ends up leaving Yes because he can't really handle singing full time, because they just found him on YouTube as a replacement singer, and he was good, but he couldn't keep up with it. So then they get another replacement singer, and that's the guy who's with them today. and that guy's name is John Davison. And they've done 2 albums with him, but I'm not really there in the timeline yet. So then, in a weird twist of fate, Trevor Horn comes back again, and the album I just showed you, Fly From Here, which had the new singer on it, they redid with Trevor Horn singing on it now, and they called it Fly From Here Return Trip. So they kind of just, it was the same material, but Trevor Horn just replaced Benoit David, and now you had this. So now if you wanted to hear the 1980 version of Yes, essentially again play, you could, because you had Trevor Horn, Jeff Downs, Chris Squire, and Steve Howe and Alan White basically doing Drama Part 2, which is what the Return Trip is. So I got it, but it kind of was crappy to do because they ended up, really kind of shelving and disowning what they did with Benoit, and he did a good job on the first Fly From Here. So, back to the current Yes. So the current Yes has produced 2 studio albums, and one of those ended up being Squire's last album, which was called Heaven and Earth, which came out in 2014, and the most recent one, which came out last year, called The Quest. I have not bought those albums. I haven't listened to those albums. I have no desire to. For me, the fire has gone out for new music from Yes, because it's just a rehash, and they have a guy that just sounds like John, and they're just trying to do retread stuff, and to me, I just can't get on board with any new Yes material at this point anymore. I've spent 20 years, 25 years following Yes, a devout Anderson follower, but I appreciate when other members come in and take over, like Trevor Horn, but I can't get behind another new singer doing new material. It's not there for me, and especially now that Chris Squire's gone and now that Alan White's gone, I think it's time that they call it a day. All due respect to what Chris wanted to do. John Anderson's out there by himself now, touring with kids and drawing the same kind of crowds that the current Yes would do. In fact, I'm going to go see him in 2 weeks. Here in New Jersey, do all of Close to the Edge with high school kids playing with him, and he sounds better than ever. Meanwhile, the current Yes is touring Europe, but I don't want to get into this whole new Yes, but it's just how I feel. I give them credit for keeping on, but I'm just not there with it anymore. Having said that, I have seen the John Anderson-less Benoit David-less Yes a few times with this new singer. And only because they really changed up the set list. And one time in 2016 they did that. They did most of Drama and 2 sides of Tales. And I saw that tour, and it was great. Why? Because they weren't just doing the same 70s stuff. They were doing challenging material. And because they were doing challenging material, I said, you know what? I'm going to go. So in 2016 I did. I went to the Topographic Drama show in Staten Island, and I saw them do 2 sides of Tales, The Revealing and Ritual, and all of Drama. And that was a great show. Why? Because it was newer material. You weren't hearing the Yes album. You weren't hearing Close to the Edge or Fragile. They were doing really challenging stuff, and on that merit, I could really go. And I have all the respect in the world for Billy Sherwood. I think in replacing Chris Squire, he's a phenomenal bassist. He's just a phenomenal person. He's a great guy. I've exchanged emails with him. I've talked to him at concerts. He's a great guy. And I like that the flame is being kept alive there. I just personally can't get on with any new music. But if they did more stuff like this and play deeper stuff, hell, I might go see them again. Now, whatever happened to John Anderson now? Well, Anderson, right around the same time, reunited with Trevor Rabin of 80s Yes and Rick Wakeman of 70s Yes. And they formed their own offshoot brand of Yes. It's very confusing, folks. You need like a PhD sometimes to follow the lineage. But trust me, it makes sense. I know I might be speaking hieroglyphics, but it makes sense. And they came back together in 2017, and they formed themselves as ARW initially. That's all they were, was ARW. Then they changed their name to be called Yes, featuring John Anderson, Trevor Rabin, and Rick Wakeman. And I saw 3 of these concerts. Let me tell you, now I missed the boat on 80s Yes, as you know. I only ever saw the 90s version of Yes with Steve Howe. I never got to see Trevor Rabin or any of the 80s material. So I couldn't wait to go see Trevor Rabin and then play with, John and Rick. And the reason that they got together is that these guys got so well on during the Union tour, especially Trevor Rabin and Rick Wakeman. They bonded, and they bonded well. So you had a 70s guy and an 80s guy, and out of that you had John in the middle, and they were good. You had the best of the 80s, and you had the best of the 70s. And I got to see them 3 times. I got to see them do a song from Talk. I got to see them do On of a Lonely Heart, Trevor Rabin. You know, I got to hear Lift Me Up from Union, which is a Trevor Rabin song. So for me, it was Nirvana. Given the fact that John had not been with Yes proper by this point in 10, 12 years, you know, his last show with True Yes was in 2004. So in 2016-17, John playing under any Yes banner was like an immediate, I got to go see them. And this is a live album from their show they did at the Apollo in England, and can't recommend this enough. It's as Yes as you can get. It really is. And they were backed up by Lee Pomeroy on bass. I forget who the drummer was. But Lee Pomeroy has kind of played with ELO too as well. But really, really great live album. No studio work though. They did not get any studio work out of that band. So that's my Yes canon on CD. I've got loads of compilations and stuff. You know, a couple box sets of, I don't know, 20 or 30 ticket stubs over the years. When I was preparing this episode, I had to dig through the Yes treasure troves. You know, I've got tour guides and programs and DVDs and box sets, and I think I could do my own podcast on Yes. I have so much stuff. But I knew this was going to be a lot longer than a half hour, and I'm not done quite yet. You know, Yes has a couple box sets they did over the years. This was the very first one that came out. This was Yes years. This came out in 91. So this was basically Yes history from 69 up until 1990. With some B-sides and demos on it, which was enticing as well. So this is a nice one to have as well. Then you had in 2005 a live box set called The Word Is Live. Again, all artwork by Roger Dean. This was nice because it was all live rarities from 69 all the way to the 80s. Then in 2002, when Rick came back, they did this In a Word box set, which again had some more B-sides and outtakes that didn't make it onto anything else. And I remember playing the heck out of this one because I was about 20 at the time when this came out. So this was a big in the car when we had CD players. This featured regularly, the In a Word box set. Absolutely tremendous. Saw them so fortunate to have seen them so many times in that period. Okay, some Yes vinyl, selected Yes vinyl. I already showed you the ladder. And these are kind of the newer vinyl. I mean, I have loads of all the other classic 70s stuff, but this is the Yes live. This is Yes featuring Anderson, Rabin, and Wakeman live at the Apollo on colored vinyl. Got this a couple of years ago. Absolutely just tremendous. This is the Fly From Here return trip with Trevor Horn, basically the drama lineup again. And this was a nice acquisition as well. A couple of years back, they did a live box set called Progeny, songs from the 72, shows from the 72 tour. And that's what this is. This is highlights from 72. Basically, it's Yes Songs, the Yes Songs album I showed you earlier. It's just a kind of another package of that same set list, but from different venues on that Close to the Edge tour in 72, but better recorded. And, of course, classic Roger Dean artwork as well on here. Other Yes rarities on vinyl that are hard to come by. Magnification on vinyl. This was done a couple of years ago. I think Eagle Records reproduced it. 3 sides as well. Again, always kind of hard to find. This, later vinyl that's been reproduced as well. One I got not too long ago. Again, I'm not a huge fan of it, but it's got nice colored vinyl. Open Your Eyes, which came out. This is a limited run of 3,000. Red and orange vinyl, like the Yes lettering on here. Again, collectible. And again, if I'm in the mood for like that Billy Sherwood kind of version of Yes, which I am sometimes, I'll throw this on. And then one of my favorite ones, of course, is a repressing of the Trevor Rabin album Talk, the Yes album, Trevor Rabin's final Yes album Talk, which was on the Music on Vinyl label. An original copy of Talk was pressed on vinyl in '94. It goes for like $200. It's a lot of money. But yeah, this is no gatefold, but just a special one in my Yes vinyl collection. Again, I've got all the classic 70s and 80s, in the other room, but I just wanted to pull out a few of my vinyl repressings that I do enjoy quite a bit. Let's go to some concert films, okay? They've got a ton of them as well. Okay, we got Yes Songs, the first original one from 73. This is basically the Yes, this is a video version of that album. We've got, let's see here. I was in order here, but I'm not. We've got Anderson, Bruford, Wakeman, and Howe in The Big Dream. when that kind of other Yes Part 2 from the 80s got together. Yes, Greatest Video Hits, all their official videos, and they're funny to watch because some of them are so bad, but some are pretty good, so these are all their videos. A faux pas in the Yes video history. Keys to Ascension. Now, told you how fond I was of that lineup getting back together because it's the first time I discovered Yes. But man, this video was so crappily produced. It just should have been a wide shot of the stage of the band playing, and instead we get these 3D images of nonsense, of picturescapes and people kind of over the music, which really is a shame because this album, this live concert should have been so documented better because it was so historic. You know, those 3 nights in '96, those 5 guys got together and did this, and to have this kind of B-level, C-level film with these video effects overlaid the concert footage is a real pity. If somebody ever found that footage and did it proper, God, I'd pin a medal on that person because it needs it. House of Yes, as I mentioned, from the latter tour. This is the show at the House of Blues in Vegas. Remember it well. Yes Symphonic in 2001. One of the best ones ever. Okay. Yes Speak, documentary from 2002. Yes Live at Montreux, Switzerland. This is with Wakeman back as well. As I remember that 2002 to 2004 period. That covers that kind of, and really Wakeman's last hurrah with the band really ended up being. And finally, one of the last concerts that he did with them was the 35th anniversary tour, the Songs from Songus. And this was a show that the Classic Five did in 2004 from Lowell, Massachusetts. I ended up seeing them, I think, a night or two prior at the Garden. And this was an epic. This was the last time Yes played arenas this big. Was in 2004. They've never been back to arenas of that size anymore. So really, the Songs from Songus is the last time you get the Classic Five together before everything kind of changes. And then this is the documentary Classic Artists, about a 3.5-hour documentary, which I discovered about a decade ago. Full, made with the band's cooperation, recorded with the band, covering Yes up until that time. Probably the best one out there. There's Yes Years, but that's outdated now. This is too, but this at least goes up until about 2011, I think, or 2010. So this is really awesome to watch, comprehensive. Some solo stuff. I could do a whole other episode on solo stuff, but I'm just going to hit the highlights here. Anderson, I think I'm a huge fan of on his own. So I've got a couple of things here as well, if I can just separate from the pile. John's first solo album, Olias of Sun Hillow. This is a Cherry Red re-release that came out last year. Expanded. Such a great job. Came out in '76. While Yes was taking a break in between the Relayer tour and going for the One. Great Yes. That's not a Yes album, but it might as well be. It feels like one. I think my personal favorite John album, Song of Seven, from 1980. This was done right after he and Rick left Yes, right after Tormato. Little poppy, but very proggy in spots. My overall favorite John Anderson album. Just amazing. Also, the follow-up to that, 1982's Animation. Great record again. Jack Bruce features on it as well. Animation, the title track. Just Yes quality. Yes quality stuff. 2016, John Anderson did a collaboration with Ronye Stalt of the Flower Kings. I hope I said his name right. Also has played with Steve Hackett, and they did a really great album called The Invention of Knowledge. And this, again, spirit of Yes is all over this record. It's a rock album. John's done a lot of new age stuff, a lot of avant-garde stuff, chanting stuff. John's at his best when he's with a band, not solo. When he's with a band and he can really shine and they're rocking, and the Invention of Knowledge album has got that as well. So that's John solo. John, as you know, also did a lot of collaborating with Vangelis, who just passed away. Chariots of Fire fame. My favorite album that they did together was an album called Private Collection from 1983. Got a nice 22-minute long song on this one called Horizon. So it's a mixture of that Vangelis type kind of movie music, Blade Runner-ish, and then John Anderson. So if you like John Anderson's voice and you like Vangelis's, compositional style, seek out the Johnny Manganiello stuff because it's worth having. Chris Squire, Yes bassist, did one solo album, and it's worth getting. Fish Out of Water came out in 1975. Features former Yes drummer Bill Bruford on it. 5 tracks, but really rocking. Probably one of the best Yes solo albums ever, and that's Fish Out of Water. He only ever did one, so Fish Out of Water, highly worth getting if you're a bass guy. And then, I forgot about John. John, a couple years ago, did 1,000 Hands, his last new album that he did with a full band. Got to see him twice on this tour. Absolutely awesome. Good record. Little reggae in spots, little rocking in spots, but look at all the people that are on this record. That's why it's called 1,000 Hands. He's got Steve Howe on it, Alan White, so loads and loads of people on it. But this is a good album as well too. Now we get to good old Rick Wakeman, who's got 1,000 solo albums. I've only picked a handful because they're my favorites and the ones I listen to the most. Okay, if you're any Rick fan at all, you've got to have his first or second solo album, Six Wives of Henry VIII. That's classic. It worked its way into many Yes set lists, the solos of that. And then his biggest solo album ever, of course, 1974's Journey to the Center of the Earth, which is just classic. He redid that album again in a modern context with new musicians and new artwork with Roger Dean in 2014, and based on the Jules Verne novel. Again, great keyboard work on there and some narration as well. And then he did a sequel to Journey to the Center of the Earth and called it Return to the Center of the Earth. And this came out in '99. Has some guest vocalists on it. Ozzy Osbourne guests on a track called Buried Alive. So if you ever wanted to hear what Sabbath and Yes might have sounded like, check out the track Buried Alive, because that's an awesome track off of this. And then his most recent one, which I got at his show last year, The Red Planet, Rick Wakeman and the English Rock Ensemble. This is, again, Rick has lots of albums where it's just, pianos or keyboards. This is Rick with a band. And it's the kind of, I've harped on that with John in solo and Rick in solo. These guys are better when they have bands augmenting them. So this is a true prog rock album. It's instrumental and highly recommended if you're into that. So that's just a little bit of a dive into Yes. It's I knew it would be a longer episode, but with all these albums and all these lineup changes, I knew it had to be. Off the top of my head, favorite all-time Yes albums, I'll go top 5, I'll go Tales from Topographic Oceans, Going for the One, Close to the Edge, Talk, and The Ladder. Those are my top 5 Yes albums as well, and for sure. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. This was a long one, but I knew this was going to have to be done at some point. Yes has been such a mainstay in my life, and I wanted to give them the proper timeline available to do it. And I said I'm not so much in favor of them anymore creatively, but they've got such a catalog of music that it could take a lifetime to really digest and dive into. So if you have not, I strongly recommend you do so. And if you want any recommendations, hit me up, watch the video, pass it on, and let me know what you think. But that's it for this installment of Andy's Music Vault, the Yes style, which probably is going on about an hour, a little over now. So I appreciate you folks tuning in, and I'll have another one of these up probably in a couple weeks. Let this one get out there a little bit, and I'll be back with Tom doing two-leg stuff all throughout the month of July. So stay well, everybody. Stay safe, and see you next time. Bye.